The Galactic Emergency Response Center hung suspended in the void between stars, its crystalline spires reflecting the light of 1,000 distant suns. Inside the central command hub, First Responder Coordinator Zix Era's sensor tendrils twitched as new data streamed across the quantum displays. The incoming signal pulsed with an urgency that made their chromatic scales shift from their usual calm blue to a worried purple. Signal origin confirmed, the AI assistant announced, its voice carefully modulated to avoid disturbing the sensitive auditory membranes of the various alien species staffing the center. Research vessel Stellar Seeker, registration Mizari Science Academy. Location: Thorax 9. Zix Era's scales darkened further. Thorax 9. Even the name sent shivers through their neural network. The planet had earned its classification as a Category 7 death world, a designation reserved for planets so hostile that most spacefaring races wouldn't even maintain automated observation posts there. Display environmental readings, they commanded, though they already dreaded what they would see. The holographic display bloomed to life, painting a nightmare in precise scientific notation. Atmospheric pressure, 4.7 times galactic standard. Temperature fluctuations, between 40 and -80 degrees standard. Gravity, variable due to mineral deposits, ranging from 1.2 to 1.8 standard. Atmosphere, corrosive, primarily composed of fluorine compounds with high concentrations of metallic vapor. But worst of all were the life form readings. Thorax 9 hosted an ecosystem that seemed designed by a malevolent entity, creatures that had evolved in conditions that would kill most sentient species in seconds. Send emergency alert to all qualified response teams, Zix Era ordered, their tendrils weaving the complex patterns that indicated highest priority. The responses came back quickly. Too quickly. Declined. Environmental conditions exceed safety parameters. Declined. Atmospheric composition incompatible with available equipment. Declined. Gravity variations beyond acceptable range. Declined. Indigenous life forms pose unacceptable risk. Zix Era's scales shifted to the deep indigo of frustration. The Stellar Seeker carried 3 of the finest Mizari scientists, brilliant minds working on breakthrough propulsion technology. Leaving them to die wasn't just a tragedy. It was a loss the galactic community couldn't afford. There must be someone, they muttered, more to themselves than to the eye. Junior Coordinator Telmos, barely out of training, approached with the characteristic hesitation of youth. Sir, there might be. Well, there are stories. Zix Era's sensor tendrils oriented toward the Junior Coordinator. Speak. Well, sir, there's a species that recently joined the Galactic Council. They're considered primitive by some standards, but they evolved on what we classify as a death world themselves. They call it Earth. Earth. The name triggered something in Zix Era's memory banks. The gravity-heavy world with extreme temperature variations and high oxygen content. Yes, sir. Their planet hosts thousands of lethal species, regular geological catastrophes, and weather patterns that would qualify as atmospheric warfare on most worlds. They call themselves humans. Zix Era accessed the species database, their scales shifting to the bright yellow of surprise as they read. Humans had evolved on a world that would kill most species, yet they hadn't just survived. They'd thrived. They regularly ventured into spaces that would crush most beings, dove into acidic waters for recreation, and climbed frozen mountains for sport. The incoming signal pulsed again, more urgently. The Stellar Seeker's systems were failing. Connect me to the Earth Emergency Response Network, Zix Era commanded. Their scales shifted to the green of hope as they added, and prepare to offer them whatever they need. We're about to find out if these humans are as remarkable as their file suggests. As the quantum comm system initialized the connection, Zix Era found themselves wondering if they were about to make history or a horrible mistake. Either way, time was running out for the Stellar Seeker's crew. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the edge of Mount Kilimanjaro's summit, the African sun painting the clouds below in shades of gold and crimson. Her students, a mix of international rescue specialists, huddled against the biting wind as she demonstrated high-altitude survival techniques. The quantum communicator at her hip chose that moment to emit its distinctive chime, a sound that hadn't been heard on Earth in months. "Excuse me," she told her students, stepping away. The holographic display materialized, showing an alien face she didn't recognize, all iridescent scales and sensory tendrils. "Commander Chen," the alien said, its translator converting complex harmonic tones into clear English. "I am Coordinator HFY of the Galactic Emergency Response Center. We have a situation that requires unique capabilities." Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her mind raced. The Galactic Council rarely contacted Earth for anything beyond basic cultural exchange. "I'm listening." As HFY explained the situation on Thorax 9, Sarah found herself nodding. The conditions sounded harsh, but nothing beyond what Earth's special forces and rescue teams dealt with regularly. The gravity variations were similar to deep-sea pressure changes, the atmospheric corrosion comparable to certain volcanic vents, and the temperature swings no worse than an Antarctic winter. "I'll need a team," she said, interrupting HFY's careful explanation of the risks. "And equipment. What's our timeline?" The alien scales shifted color rapidly. You'll accept the mission, without concern for the environmental hazards." Sarah almost smiled. "Coordinator, those conditions you described. We call that Tuesday. Now, about that team." Within 3 hours, Sarah's chosen specialists assembled at the newly constructed Galactic Exchange Center in Geneva. Maya Patel arrived first, her compact frame belying the strength that had helped her save an entire climbing expedition during the Everest megastorm of 2024. She carried only a small pack, but Sarah knew it contained survival gear tested in Earth's harshest environments. Marcus Rodriguez strode in next, still wearing the cave rescue gear from his latest expedition. His ability to navigate Earth's deepest caverns had saved countless lives, and his understanding of pressure dynamics in confined spaces was unmatched. The scars on his face told stories of close calls that would terrify most beings, human or alien. Dr. Jin Park arrived last, direct from his research facility in Osaka. His breakthrough work on survival suits for Venus exploration had revolutionized human understanding of hostile environment protection. He dragged a large case behind him, undoubtedly filled with prototype gear that skirted the edge of what physics allowed. "Nice of you all to come on such short notice," Sarah said, watching as her team familiarized themselves with the alien technology scattered around the center. "We have a rescue mission on a world that makes Death Valley look like a resort." "Sounds fun," Maya grinned, already examining the holographic display of Thorax 9's surface conditions. "Those gravity variations will make climbing interesting." Marcus nodded toward the atmospheric readout. "Corrosive atmosphere. Reminds me of that sulfur cave system in Indonesia. Remember that rescue, Sarah?" "Hard to forget," Sarah replied, noting how HFY's scales had shifted to a new color as they observed the humans casually discussing conditions that would kill most species. "Dr. Park, thoughts on the environmental challenges?" Jin was already modifying one of his prototype suits. "The fluorine compounds will be tricky, but nothing we haven't dealt with in the Venusian simulation chambers. Give me 2 hours with the galactic tech, and I'll have our gear ready." Sarah turned to HFY, who had been watching the exchange with increasing amazement. "Your ship ready to transport us? We can be suited up and prepared to launch in 3 hours." The alien coordinator's scales rippled with what Sarah assumed was disbelief. "You understand that no other response team would even consider this mission." Maya laughed, the sound echoing through the center. "That's because they haven't spent their lives training on a death world. Trust me, Coordinator, compared to some of Earth's hot spots, your crisis sounds almost relaxing." Sarah watched pride bloom across her team's faces. They were Earth's finest, forged in the crucible of a planet that had tried its best to kill humanity for millions of years. Now they would show the galaxy exactly what that meant. The Terra's Hope burst from hyperspace in a flash of quantum displacement, its hybrid hull gleaming with the combined brilliance of human engineering and galactic technology. Through the reinforced observation dome, Thorax 9 filled the view, a world that seemed to burn and freeze simultaneously beneath swirling storms of crystalline lightning. Sarah Chen stood at the command station, her modified survival suit already sealed except for her helmet. Around her, the Galactic observation team huddled behind radiation shields, their various appendages trembling at the sight of the planet below. In contrast, her human team moved with practiced efficiency, each checking their equipment with the casual expertise of veterans. "Dr. Park," Sarah called out, "what do you make of those lightning formations?" Jin Park hadn't looked up from his sensor array, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Fascinating. The electrical discharges are following metallic deposits in the upper atmosphere, creating predictable patterns, similar to how lightning follows copper deposits in the Atacama Desert storms." "Can we use that?" Maya asked, already plotting potential descent vectors on her tactical display. "Better." Jin smiled. "We can predict it. The storm patterns repeat every 43 minutes. Give me another cycle of observations, and I'll have a safe corridor mapped out." Marcus Rodriguez pressed his hand against the observation window, feeling the vibrations through his suit's sensors. "Check out those crystal formations in the upper atmosphere. They're growing and dissolving in real time. Reminds me of the mineral deposits in the La Chugilla cave system, just accelerated by a factor of 1,000. The lead galactic observer, a tall crystalline being named First Scout Ixel, stepped forward cautiously. "Surely you don't intend to descend through that maelstrom. The atmospheric pressure alone would crush most ships, and the corrosive elements would dissolve standard hull plating in seconds." Sarah finished. "That's why we're not using standard anything." "Maya, what's our structural integrity looking like?" Maya glanced up from her station, grinning. "The reinforced graphene diamond composite is holding perfectly. Those modifications we made in Geneva are working even better than expected. This ship could probably handle a deep-sea dive into Jupiter's core." "The Mizari vessel's distress beacon is still active," Jin reported, his display showing a pulsing red dot through layers of atmospheric interference. "But it's weakening. I estimate we have less than 6 hours before their containment systems fail completely." Sarah nodded, her expression focused as she absorbed the data flowing across her helmet's heads-up display. The planet below was a nightmare by most species standards, but she saw patterns in the chaos. The crystal storms followed rules, the gravity fluctuations had rhythm, and even the corrosive atmosphere behaved according to predictable chemical laws. "Listen up," she announced, her voice carrying the calm authority that had led dozens of successful rescues on Earth. "We've got conditions similar to what we've trained for. The gravity shifts are no worse than the pressure changes we dealt with in the Mariana Trench rescue. The atmospheric corrosion is comparable to that chemical plant explosion in Bangladesh. And these storms, just another day in Tornado Alley." She turned to face her team, seeing the same confident determination in their eyes that she felt. "Jin, you've got 10 minutes to finish mapping that lightning pattern. Maya, plot us a descent path that uses the gravity wells to our advantage. Marcus, I want a complete analysis of those crystal formations. If we need to set down, I want to know which structures will support our weight." The galactic observers watched in stunned silence as the humans calmly prepared to dive into conditions that had caused every other rescue team to refuse the mission outright. First Scout Ixel's crystalline form vibrated with a frequency that indicated extreme confusion. "Commander Chen," Ixel ventured, "you speak of these lethal conditions as if they were routine." Sarah's slight smile was visible through her helmet's transparent faceplate. "That's because on Earth, they are. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a rescue to execute." Above them, another bolt of crystalline lightning shattered the atmosphere, scattering prismatic shards across the void. Below, Thorax 9 waited, its surface stirring with challenges that would make most species retreat in terror. But for the crew of Terra's Hope, it was just another day at the office. The Terra's Hope pierced through the upper atmosphere of Thorax 9, riding the gravitational currents like a surfer catching waves. Inside the ship, Maya's hands danced across the controls, making minute adjustments as they descended through layers of crystalline clouds. Each navigation correction was precise, calculated to use the planet's harsh conditions to their advantage rather than fighting against them. First thermal barrier in 3 minutes, Jin announced from his station, his eyes fixed on the sensor readings. Atmospheric density increasing. We're about to hit the zone where the stellar serpents were last reported. Sarah nodded, watching as the swirling storms outside took on an almost organic quality. Marcus, what do we know about these creatures? Based on the fragmented data from previous expeditions, Marcus replied, pulling up holographic displays of serpentine shapes. They're silicon-based life forms that use the electrical storms for both navigation and feeding. Length varies from 50 to 200 meters. They generate their own electromagnetic fields too. His briefing was cut short as the ship's sensors blared a warning. Through the observation windows, massive shapes began to materialize in the crystalline fog. They moved with impossible grace for their size, their bodies resembling flowing mercury crossed with lightning given physical form. First Scout Ixal's crystalline form vibrated with terror. Stellar serpents. An entire pod. We must retreat before. No, Sarah interrupted, her voice calm but firm. Maya, hold our position. Jin, start recording their movement patterns. Marcus, compare their behavior to Earth's atmospheric predators. The stellar serpents drew closer, their bodies rippling with internal lightning. The largest one, nearly twice the length of their ship, curved through the storm to face them directly. Its surface reflected the crystalline lightning in hypnotic patterns. Got it, Marcus exclaimed. They're behaving like storm petrels. These aren't attack patterns. They're curious about us because we're moving through their feeding lanes differently than their usual prey. Maya's hands remained steady on the controls, like the birds that follow fishing boats. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. And look at their electromagnetic field patterns. They're using them to communicate, just like electric eels in the Amazon. If we can replicate those signals. Jin was already adjusting his equipment, rerouting power to our outer hull's electromagnetic grid. Commander, I can mimic their communication frequencies, but we'll need to time it perfectly with their movements. Sarah studied the graceful dance of the creatures outside. Where others saw monsters, she saw sophisticated predators, not unlike Earth's own wildlife. Do it. Maya, prepare to move with them, not against them. Like swimming with whale sharks, respect their space, match their rhythm. The hull hummed as Jin activated the electromagnetic field. The nearest stellar serpent paused its approach, its internal lightning patterns shifting in response. For a tense moment, the ship and the creature seemed to study each other. Then, slowly, the massive being moved aside, creating a gap in the pod's formation. The other serpents followed suit, their bodies weaving a complex pattern that opened a clear corridor through the storm. They're giving us an escort, Maya whispered, awe evident in her voice, as she guided the ship forward. They're actually showing us the safe path through their hunting grounds. Through the crystalline storms, the Terra's Hope moved in perfect synchronization with the stellar serpents. Each flash of lightning revealed more of the creatures joining their descent, their bodies creating a living tunnel through the atmospheric chaos. First Scout Ixal's crystalline structure had shifted from terror frequency to amazement. In all recorded encounters, these beings have attacked on sight. How did you know they would respond differently to us? Sarah allowed herself a small smile. On Earth, we learned long ago that most creatures aren't mindless killers. They're living beings with their own patterns and behaviors. Sometimes, showing respect and understanding is better than showing fear. Besides, Maya added, smoothly adjusting their course to match a particularly elegant movement from their escorts, Compared to swimming with great white sharks or tracking Bengal tigers, this is actually pretty peaceful. The stellar serpents continued their majestic dance around the ship, their electromagnetic pulses now matching the frequency of the Terra's Hope's field in perfect harmony. As they descended deeper into Thorax 9's atmosphere, the human team had turned what other species saw as a deadly threat into an unexpected alliance. The Terra's Hope settled onto a relatively stable crystal formation, its landing struts adapting to the ever-shifting surface. Through their reinforced viewports, the landscape of Thorax 9 stretched out before them like a fever dream made real. Crystalline spires rose and crumbled in real time, while rivers of liquid metal carved new paths across the terrain every few minutes. Landing zone secure, Maya reported, her fingers dancing across the environmental controls. Local gravity holding at 1.6 standard. Surface temperature, fluctuating between 45 and negative 30 degrees Celsius. Sarah stood at the primary airlock, running final checks on her modified environment suit. Jin, how's our equipment handling the atmosphere? Better than expected, Jin replied, monitoring the external sensors. The graphene ceramic composite is holding up against the corrosion. But those crystal spores in the air, he frowned at his readings. They're trying to bond with any exposed surface, like aggressive crystallization, but almost intelligent. Marcus stepped up beside them, his suit already sealed. Reminds me of the silicon-based growth patterns in the Naka crystal caves, just accelerated by a factor of 100. We'll need to keep moving to prevent accumulation. First Scout Ixel's crystalline form vibrated with concern. The Stellar Seeker's distress beacon lies 8 kilometers across that. They gestured toward the chaos outside. No recorded expedition has managed to traverse more than 1 kilometer of Thorax 9's surface on foot. Then we'll set a new record, Sarah stated, sealing her helmet. Maya, you have point. Marcus, take R6. Jin, keep monitoring those crystal formations. If they start growing too fast, we'll need to know. The airlock cycled, and Earth's rescue team stepped onto the surface of one of the galaxy's most lethal planets. The crystal ground crunched beneath their boots, each step releasing small puffs of metallic vapor into the turbulent atmosphere. They moved in formation, their movements practiced and precise. Maya led the way, using her expertise in glacier traversal to identify stable paths across the constantly changing terrain. Behind her, Sarah and Jin maintained a steady pace while monitoring their surroundings. Marcus brought up the rear, keeping watch for any signs of pursuit from the ground-based predators mentioned in the planetary database. The first challenge came 3 kilometers in. A massive gravity wave rolled across the landscape, turning simple steps into bone-crushing struggles. Instead of fighting it, the team adapted instantly. Formation Mariana, Sarah commanded. The team quickly shifted their positions, using the same techniques they'd developed for deep-sea operations on Earth. Their suits' power systems redirected energy to compensate for the crushing force, while their movements became smooth and economical. Just like the Challenger deep expedition, Maya called out, her voice steady despite the strain. Remember when that underwater volcano decided to wake up during our descent? The gravity wave passed, only to be replaced by a new threat. Crystal spores filled the air, seeking to transform anything they touched into more crystalline structures. The team's suits began to sparkle as the aggressive growth tried to take hold. Ultrasonic pulses engaged, Jin announced, activating a modification he'd added during their descent. The crystals shattered and fell away as sound waves at precisely calculated frequencies disrupted their formation. Same principle we used to prevent ice buildup during the Mount Logan rescue. They pressed on. Each challenge met with a solution born from Earth's harshest environments. When acid rain began to fall, they used the same protocols developed for volcanic gas exposure. When the ground turned liquid without warning, they employed techniques from crossing lava fields in Hawaii. First Scout Ixel, watching through the ship's cameras, transmitted continuous updates to the Galactic Emergency Response Center. Their reports carried an unmistakable tone of awe as the humans treated lethal planetary conditions as mere obstacles to be overcome. 6 kilometers, Sarah announced, checking their progress. Maya, how's our path looking? Got a ridge of stable crystal formations leading most of the way to the target, Maya replied, her expert eye picking out the safest route. Though stable is relative when everything's trying to either crush, dissolve, or crystallize us. Just another day at the office, Marcus quipped from the rear, his sensors sweeping for threats. At least nothing's on fire. Remember that oil rig rescue in the North Sea? Sarah allowed herself a small smile inside her helmet. They were making progress, turning the impossible into the merely difficult through experience, technology, and sheer human determination. The Stellar Seeker's crew was counting on them, and Earth's finest rescue team had no intention of letting them down. The Stellar Seeker emerged from the crystalline haze like a wounded creature. Its once sleek hull was now half transformed into spiraling crystal formations, while rivers of liquid metal pooled around its landing struts. The ship's emergency containment fields flickered weakly, creating patches of temporary stability in the chaos of Thorax 9's atmosphere. Life signs confirmed, Jin announced, his sensors penetrating the vessel's compromised hull. 3 signatures, all contained within the central research module. Environmental systems at 12% capacity and falling. Sarah studied the wreckage with experienced eyes. Maya, check those crystal formations. Are any of them load-bearing now? Unfortunately, yes, Maya replied, her suit's scanners mapping the complex network of crystalline growth. The entire port side has been incorporated into the planet's surface structure. It's like the ship's becoming part of Thorax 9 itself. Marcus moved forward cautiously, his boots crunching on the unstable surface. Reminds me of that rescue in the salt mines of Pakistan. Remember how the walls kept trying to seal themselves? Access point identified. Jin called out, pointing to what remained of the ship's primary airlock. But the atmospheric separation field is failing. Once we breach it, we'll expose the interior to Thorax 9's environment. Sarah nodded, already formulating a plan. Standard deep space rescue protocols won't work here. We need tow. A sudden tremor cut through their discussion. The ground shifted, and new crystal formations burst upward around the wreck. The team moved with practiced ease, adjusting their positions to maintain stability. We need to move now, Sarah decided. Maya, take point on the airlock. Marcus, prep the emergency containment gear. Jin, keep monitoring those crystal growth patterns. The team advanced toward the ship, their movements precise despite the hostile conditions. The airlock's control panel had been partially crystallized, but Maya's experienced hands made quick work of the override sequence. The inner door slid open with a hiss of escaping atmosphere, revealing 3 Mizari scientists huddled in their sealed environment suits. Their tall, elegant forms were cramped in the small space, and their typically luminescent skin had dulled with stress. Impossible, one of them whispered through the translator. No rescue team would attempt planetfall in these conditions. We're not your typical rescue team, Sarah replied, stepping inside. I'm Commander Chen, Earth Emergency Response. We're here to get you out. The lead scientist, who introduced himself as Senior Researcher Vexil, shook his head. Our situation is beyond hope. Keena's suit was damaged in the crash. He gestured to one of his colleagues, whose environmental suit showed a growing crystal formation where it had been breached. The crystal spores are spreading through her support systems. Any attempt to move her will cause catastrophic suit failure. Jin moved closer, his sensors analyzing the crystal growth. The spores are using her suit's power system to accelerate their reproduction, similar to how bacteria colonies exploit energy sources, but with a silicon-based structural pattern. We can't evacuate her without killing her, Vexil explained, his voice heavy with resignation, and we refuse to abandon our colleague. Sarah watched the crystals spreading through Keena's suit systems, her mind racing through possible solutions. The situation reminded her of multiple Earth rescues, The crystalline growth patterns were similar to rapid ice formation in high-altitude conditions, while the power system exploitation resembled how certain marine organisms could hijack electronic equipment. "Jin," she called out, "remember that technique we developed for the quantum reactor accident?" When the cooling crystals started growing out of control, Jin's eyes widened behind his faceplate. "Yes, but adapting it for biological compatibility. We'd need precise power modulation and a way to maintain atmospheric integrity during the transition." "Marcus, what about those cave rescue protocols? The ones for handling unstable mineral formations?" Marcus nodded slowly, already understanding where Sarah was going. "We could modify the portable containment field to create a controlled environment for the extraction, like how we handle unstable rock formations, but on a molecular level." The Mizari scientists watched this exchange with growing amazement as Earth's rescue team began to formulate a solution that their advanced civilization had deemed impossible. In the harsh environment of Thorax 9, human ingenuity was about to attempt something unprecedented. Time was running out. The crystal formation on Keena's suit had spread to cover nearly 30% of her life support systems, its elaborate patterns glinting in the emergency lights of the Stellar Seeker's cramped compartment. Sarah watched as Jin and Marcus worked with practiced efficiency, their movements precise despite the growing pressure. Environmental containment field stabilized. Maya reported from her position by the airlock. "We've got maybe 20 minutes before the ship's remaining power fails completely." Jin had transformed their small space into an improvised laboratory, his modified sensors projecting detailed holographic models of the crystal growth patterns. "The spores are using a quantum-level bonding process to hijack the suit's power distribution." Fascinating. And terrifying. Less fascination, more solution, Sarah reminded him, though she understood his scientific curiosity. "Marcus, how's that containment modification coming?" Marcus looked up from the equipment he'd been reconfiguring. "Almost there. I'm adapting our cave rescue protocols to work at a molecular level. The principle is the same: create a stable pocket within an unstable environment." Senior researcher Vexil watched with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Even if you could maintain atmospheric integrity, the crystal formation is integrated with her suit's systems. Any disruption would be fatal. "That's why we're not going to disrupt it," Sarah explained, her voice carrying the calm confidence that had guided countless successful rescues. "We're going to redirect it." Jin nodded, his fingers dancing across his holographic interface. "Think of it like dealing with a flash flood. You can't stop the water, but you can channel it. These crystals are following energy patterns, just like water follows the path of least resistance." "I've seen something similar," Marcus added, making final adjustments to their modified equipment. "In the Neka crystal cave system, we discovered that certain mineral formations would actually change their growth patterns when exposed to specific electromagnetic frequencies." Sarah turned to Keena, who had remained silent throughout their preparations. "We're going to create a controlled energy gradient, leading the crystal growth away from your critical systems and into a contained receptor array, like performing a controlled demolition in reverse." "The risk," Vexil began, but Keena interrupted him. "Is acceptable," she said, her translator conveying determination. "I study your species' approach to impossible situations. If anyone can achieve this, it's a human rescue team." Sarah nodded to her team. "Jin, start the power modulation sequence. Marcus, activate the molecular containment field. Maya, be ready with the emergency protocols if anything goes wrong. Let's show them why Earth specializes in impossible rescues." The air hummed with energy as their modified equipment came to life. Jin's carefully calculated electromagnetic pulses began to interact with the crystal formation, creating patterns of light that danced across Keena's suit. The crystals responded, their growth slowing, then gradually changing direction. "It's working," Marcus announced, monitoring the molecular containment field. "The crystal structure is following our energy gradient, like redirecting a river with strategic dam placement." "Power consumption is stable," Maya reported. Ship's systems are holding. Barely. Everyone watched as the crystal formation slowly began to retract from Keena's critical systems, following the carefully designed energy pathways into the receptor array. Jin's face showed intense concentration as he made micro-adjustments to the electromagnetic field, guiding the crystal growth with the precision of a surgeon. "Remarkable," Vexil whispered, his scientific curiosity overcoming his concern. "You're not fighting the planet's natural processes. You're working with them." "Sometimes the best way to solve a problem isn't to overpower it," Sarah explained, watching the progress carefully. "On Earth, we learned long ago that understanding and adapting to natural forces is often more effective than trying to defeat them." The crystal formation continued its controlled migration, leaving behind Keena's vital support systems. Where advanced alien technology had seen an impossible obstacle, human ingenuity had found a solution by applying principles learned from Earth's most challenging environments. 90% transfer complete, Jin announced, his voice tight with concentration. "The remaining crystal mass is responding perfectly to the electromagnetic guidance." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Once again, humanity's unique perspective, born from evolving on a world that constantly tried to kill them, had turned seeming defeat into victory. The impossible was becoming possible, one careful step at a time. The Terra's hope broke through Thorax 9's turbulent atmosphere, its hull gleaming with crystalline residue from their ascent. Inside, the rescue team and their Mizari charges watched as the deadly planet receded beneath them, its swirling storms now seeming almost beautiful from a safe distance. Structural integrity holding at 87%. Maya reported from the pilot's station, her fingers dancing across the controls as she guided them through the last layers of crystal-laden clouds. "Our stellar serpent friends are giving us another escort." Through the viewport, the massive silicon-based creatures glided alongside their ship, their internal lightning patterns pulsing in what seemed almost like a farewell display. The modifications to Keena's suit had not only saved her life, but had yielded fascinating new data about Thorax 9's unique biology. "I still can't quite believe it," senior researcher Vexil said, his luminescent skin finally returning to its normal bright hue. "Not just the rescue itself, but the way you approached every challenge. Where we saw insurmountable obstacles, you saw puzzles to be solved." Sarah stood at the command station, completing her mission report for the Galactic Emergency Response Center. "That's the thing about evolving on Earth," she replied. "When your homeworld throws everything from hurricanes to volcanoes at you, you either learn to adapt or you don't survive." "But it's more than just survival," Jin added, still analyzing the data they'd collected. "Each challenge we overcome teaches us something new. The crystal formation control techniques we develop today could revolutionize containment technologies across the galaxy." First Scout Ixel, who had maintained contact with them throughout the mission, spoke through the ship's comm system. "The Galactic Council is already discussing the implications of your success. There are talks of establishing a specialized emergency response division, with Earth as its primary training ground." Marcus laughed as he secured their rescue equipment. "Earth as a training ground. Most species consider it a death world." "Exactly," Keena spoke up, her translator conveying enthusiasm despite her exhaustion. "Who better to teach emergency response than those who treat extreme conditions as normal? My own experience today has shown me that what we consider impossible might simply be a matter of perspective." The quantum communicator chimed, and Coordinator Zixera's image appeared, their scales shifting through colors that indicated both relief and excitement. "Commander Chen, the Galactic Council has unanimously approved a proposal. They want to establish an emergency response academy on Earth, combining human experience with galactic technology." Sarah shared proud looks with her team. "I think we can work with that. After all, Earth's environments offer perfect training scenarios. The Mariana Trench for pressure adaptation, the Atacama Desert for extreme conditions, the polar regions for survival skills. And more importantly," Maya added, setting their course for the hyperspace jump point, We can teach something that can't be replicated in any simulator: the human approach to problem solving. Speaking of problems, Marcus said with a grin, anyone else notice that this entire rescue mission took less time than the paperwork for our last Earth-based operation? The compartment filled with laughter, human and alien alike, as the Terra's Hope prepared for its jump home. Below them, Thorax 9 continued its chaotic dance of storms and crystals, but it no longer seemed like an impossible obstacle. Instead, it stood as a testament to what could be achieved when human determination met galactic technology. In the days that followed, the story of the rescue spread across the galactic community. Species that had once dismissed Earth as a primitive death world began to see it in a new light. Applications flooded in for the new Emergency Response Academy, as beings from across the galaxy sought to learn from those who had turned survival into an art form. Sarah Chen stood in her office at the Academy 6 months later, watching as the first class of alien cadets attempted to navigate a standard Earth rainforest training course. Their struggles reminded her of that day on Thorax 9, but now she saw something new in their eyes. Not just determination to survive, but excitement to learn. You know, she said to Maya, who had joined her as an instructor, maybe being from a death world isn't such a bad thing after all. Of course not, Maya replied with a smile. It just means we're pre-qualified for the really interesting jobs. Outside, Earth's challenging environments continued their eternal cycles, but now they served a greater purpose, teaching the galaxy that with the right perspective, the impossible was just another problem waiting to be solved.